Edfu building texts. Now, we must assume that these texts, there's evidence within them, had existed in some written form for thousands of years before they were finally carved into the walls of the Temple of Edfu in Upper Egypt, that there was a very ancient document that was effectively copied onto the walls of that temple. And what the Edfu building texts tell us is of the time when the gods came to Egypt. In fact, this is why I call the book Fingerprints of the Gods. When the gods came to Egypt and established the sacred places where later all temples and pyramids would be built, and who brought civilization to ancient Egypt. And the story of the Edfu building texts is that those gods previously had lived upon an island, and that island had been destroyed in a gigantic flood, and that those who came to Egypt were the survivors of that flood. And this, of course, is the myth of Atlantis by any other name.
Do you believe in also, Edgar Cayce used to talk about the Hall of Records?
Yes. I think Edgar Cayce is an extremely interesting phenomenon, and this brings us back slightly to the issue of altered states of consciousness, because Edgar Cayce was the sleeping prophet.
Yes.
He went into a trance state, and in that trance state, first and foremost, what he did was diagnose ailments of his patients.
And he was pretty accurate.
He was very accurate, and he was a great gifted healer, which he used the trance state to enhance. But also in these healing trances, he would start recalling past lives and speaking of memories of a time long ago. And he talked of Atlantis and of the fall of Atlantis and of how the survivors of Atlantis had settled in various parts of the world, amongst them ancient Egypt, and how they had, in ancient Egypt, beneath the left forepaw of the Sphinx, how they had created a subterranean chamber which contained their hall of records, a complete record of everything that Atlantis knew, and the whole story of Atlantis and the learning of Atlantis was stored there like a time capsule for future reference, for use by future civilizations when the time was right, when that information was needed. And Cayce envisaged an opening of the Hall of Records at a crucial juncture in human history, round about now, round about our time, in the 21st century. And this is information that I think we cannot discount. I highly value information that is attained in altered states of consciousness, and therefore I highly value Cayce's information, and I think it should be taken into account alongside all the other information provided by archaeologists and other researchers.
Graham, I haven't had an opportunity to talk with you about 2012. December 21st, 2012, Mayan calendar. Your take.
Well, again, this is a mystery that I went into and was forced to go into in depth in Fingerprints of the Gods as I explored the heritage of ancient wisdom in cultures all around the world. Just as ancient Egypt appeared to contain a legacy of much earlier information, so also the ancient Mayan culture of Central America contains a legacy of what looks like a technological culture, and that legacy is the Mayan calendar, which is astonishingly accurate, unbelievably precise scientific instrument, more accurate in its measure of the length of the solar year than the Gregorian calendar that we use to this day. A work of high scientific precision. And this calendar envisages time not so much as a straight line, but as a series of enormous cycles in which human civilization rises and falls. And it's just a fact that the Mayan calendar envisages the end of the present epoch of the Earth. It doesn't mean necessarily the end of the world. It doesn't even mean the end of civilization necessarily, but it means a big change is predicted by this calendar. And that change is predicted to occur on or around the 21st of December, which is the winter solstice, in the year 2012, when you convert the Mayan calendar into our calendar. And my view is that we ought to take this seriously, because it comes down to us from a remarkable civilization of antiquity who were working with this fantastically precise instrument, the Mayan calendar. we should listen to what they have to say. And what they have to say is complicated and difficult to understand. Some people interpret it as gloom and doom and the end of the world as we know it. Others interpret it with equal justification as a great transformation in human consciousness that will allow us to emerge from the chrysalis of our existing society into a new way of living on the planet. And my goodness, if there was ever a time when we humans needed to find a new way of living on the planet, that time is now. So I continue to believe that there's great truth and validity in the Mayan calendar, that we are coming up to a big change. I think all of us know it in our bones. I do not think we should manifest and project the idea of a destruction, a violent destruction of the globe. I think we should consider rather the positive view that we may emerge from this change stronger and better and better equipped to be everything we can be as human beings.
Consciousness is a marvelous thing, Graham, if it's handled correctly, isn't it?
Wonderful, wonderful thing. The greatest gift that the universe has given to us as human beings, a gift that we should revere and explore with love and with wisdom. Love, that's what's needed in the world today, above everything else.
I think so. I think we'll take some phone calls with you in our final hour. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready for that, George.
Graham's website, grahamhancock.com, once again, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Just listen to some of his works beginning in 1993. The Sign and the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, Keeper of Genesis, The Mars Mystery, Fingerprints of the Gods, The New Edition, Heaven's Mirror, Underworld, The Mysterious Origins of Civilization, Lords of Poverty, and Supernatural, which we're talking about now. Graham, does it seem like you've written so many?
No, sometimes I surprise myself. Thank you for mentioning Lords of Poverty, because that was me in my journalistic role back in the mid '80s, writing a critical book about foreign aid.
I've been following you for years, Graham. For
Thank
years.
you, George.
We'll be
Thank
back
you.
in a moment with phone calls with Graham Hancock next on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to take your phone calls in just a moment now with Graham Hancock right here on Coast to Coast AM, and that would include Fingerprints of the Gods and Supernatural. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. We've got Graham Hancock. We've got your phone calls as well. Do you think that this planet will be faced with another huge catastrophe?
Yeah, I think it's. I have to say that if you look at the broad span of history, the answer to that question has to be yes. We live in a difficult cosmic environment. The orbit of the Earth around the Sun is crossed again and again by huge asteroids, Earth-crossing asteroids called Apollo objects, some of them 10 or 20 kilometers across. Actually, if you look at a diagram of this, it's truly scary, because it seems like our little Earth is just winding its way through these massive objects that come flying at us from all directions. And sometimes we don't even notice a near miss until it's gone past. If you look at the whole issue of global warming now, that's not a new issue. But back 125,000 years ago, before the last ice age set in, we were in a period that geologists call the Eemian. There were astonishing climate fluctuations during the Eemian, much more severe than even we're experiencing now, although supposedly there was no industrial pollution at that time. You could have changes of temperature of as much as global changes of temperature of as much as 10 degrees within a period of a decade taking place. And finally, that massive climate instability plunged the world back into the last ice age, which then lasted from 125,000 years ago, really down until 12 or 13,000 years ago, when the last ice age finally came to an end. And during the ending of the last ice age, as ice sheets that were 2 miles thick on top of New York State, for example, melted down, and huge glacial lakes poured out their contents, scarring the landscape and adding 400 feet to sea level around the world. There were multiple catastrophes then. So you go back even further to the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs. There's been periods of mass extinctions on our planet. So we have to say that it is a normal part of life on Earth from time to time to experience periodic, probably random cataclysms, which just are part of the deal on living on a planet in the universe, that there will be these what life has to do is it has to bounce back. It has to be flexible. It has to cope. And the story of life on our planet over the last 4 billion years has been a story of unbelievable flexibility and resilience, and the ability to not only survive a cataclysm, but